Well, I am live. So let's see if this kicks into YouTube and LinkedIn. My very first live event. And it looks like indeed we have started. I've got a couple of viewers out there, so I'm going to give us just a couple of minutes here and make sure that I get the everybody here in the audience a chance to log in since we just went live. So we're going to go ahead and get started here in just a couple minutes. I'm really excited to be doing a live event for the very first time. And so I am here on YouTube and LinkedIn. And I'm really excited for those of you who are here with me. So thank you so much for jumping on and being with me live here as we get started. The successful educator transformation. All right. Once again, for those of you who are here live with me, thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and start the actual presentation in about a minute and a half. At 9:05, we're going to get rolling with this presentation. So if you are here and you know other educators who could benefit from this presentation, please have them jump on. They'll get access to everything they need for this presentation shortly. We will get started in about one more minute. We'll start this presentation. All right. Let's go ahead and get started with this presentation. So again, welcome to everybody who is watching me. This is my very first ever live stream, so I'm so appreciative of you being here with me. And I'm just really excited to be able to share my content with you. So let's just jump right into things. So first, I want you to know that at the Teacher Tutor, we believe in a learning culture that's focused on actual strategies that are going to help you get results. This is no hype, no fluff. Over the next 2 hours, we're going to share some really powerful content with you, including actual systems and methods that are going to help you to achieve your goals as a teacher. So here's what you can expect over that time. We are going to start by talking about how to build a positive classroom environment by establishing a structured, predictable, and positive learning space. Then we're going to jump in to how you master instructional planning by aligning lessons and units to standards and differentiating instruction. Then we're going to talk about creating effective assessments and designing standard aligned assessments so that you can actually measure student understanding. And then last, the thing that you're all going to want to talk about, which is achieving work-life balance, setting boundaries, managing time, and prioritizing tasks so that you have a more sustainable and balanced work and life. So this workshop, I believe, can really truly change things for you. That's why I want you to press in and be present. Remember that not every idea or strategy is going to be for you. So take what resonates and leave the rest. Make sure that you have the note-taking document that was sent to you if you registered on the website. And if you did, please make sure to check your spam folder and just mark it as not spam so that that won't happen in the future. If you did not register on the website and you're joining live now, or you registered directly through LinkedIn, I would love for you still to register on the website so that I can just kind of know who my audience is. And my moderator Andrea is in the comment section both on YouTube and LinkedIn, so she'll be dropping links as we go, and she will be dropping the link of the note-taking document for you now, so that you have that. But also, please do go to the website and register. I would really appreciate that. But Andrea will also just be in the chat section for you to try to answer any questions that you might have, drop links as it's needed. And if there's a question that she can't answer, she'll definitely be passing those along to me so that I can get back to you following the presentation. Know that during this presentation, there is nothing that you can purchase, and you can get all of the resources that I'm going to share for free simply by booking and attending a feedback call within the next 2 weeks after this presentation. It's just a short call where you can share your experience with me from the event. Let me know how it went. Give me feedback. I'm always looking to improve, as well as get any questions that you might have about my mentorship program answered. So with that being said, let's get into the content. So a lot of you may not know who I am, but I am Dustin. And so I would just like to share a little bit about me so that you can get to know me, who's presenting for you today, before we get going. So I am currently in my 19th year in education, and my passion really is all about supporting teachers and students to help them grow and be their best selves. I've taught in various school settings, from traditional public schools to public charters and Catholic schools even. And now I'm working in a one-on-one private school where I can serve special education students in need of more of a therapeutic school. And I've done a lot of my support and teaching both in Illinois, in the Chicago area, as well as throughout Los Angeles. I started my teaching career. I started my career really teaching as a high school teacher here in Illinois, before I spent a decade in Los Angeles, where I transitioned into school leadership. I was an assistant principal for several years, where I also continued to teach classes, because I do believe that a great leader needs to stay in touch with the classroom. And so that helps by continuing to teach a course even when you are a leader. And during that time, I found a love for helping build new schools and turn around existing schools, especially in inner city environments. That work was really all about getting students high school ready in their first 2 years and then college ready in their last 2 years. which was both challenging but also incredibly rewarding. After I returned to the Chicago area so that I could be closer to my family, I resumed my work as a school leader, helping teachers grow stronger to make a broader impact on students. And I think that's why I went into leadership in the first place, was I really wanted to have a bigger impact than what I could do with just the kids that were sitting in front of me. And following the pandemic, I decided to step back into the classroom, reigniting my passion for direct teaching. And now, like I said, I work at a school where I work with students one on one, which is really, really fun. In recent years, I've taken on new challenges by contracting with a company that helps teachers to implement self paced classrooms through in person and virtual support around Chicago, northern Indiana. And I also work with people virtually all around the country. Additionally, I offer personalized one on one coaching through the Teacher Tutor, where I mentor teachers in the areas that they most need. It's differentiated personal and professional development the same way that we ask to differentiate for our students. So that's just a little bit about me and my journey in education. I'm really excited to share what I've learned with you and help you grow in your teaching practice. But now I'd like to tell you a little bit about what I know about you. If you're here and you're a teacher, then then I think I know something about you too, right? Your dream probably started when you were young. And I bet as you grew up, you noticed that you wanted to be an impactful teacher. But now you feel overwhelmed and stuck. You've likely tried implementing various classroom management strategies, differentiating instruction, and even using new assessment methods. I bet you've had some success, but now you're at a place where you want to learn at the next level and you're not quite sure how to achieve consistency and balance in your teaching and in your life. The good news is you're here and you're in a place where you can learn strategies and methods that you can implement immediately that are going to help you. So let's get into it. We're going to kick it off with how to build strong routines, procedures, and expectations so you can create a structured classroom environment. We're going to focus on establishing clear expectations from day one, even though it's the middle of the year. That's okay. We're going to talk about creating consistent routines that students can rely on, as well as strategies for reinforcing procedures effectively. So right now in your notes, what I would love for you to do is start by thinking about a routine or a procedure that's been difficult for you to establish. Jot it down and reflect on what might be missing or what adjustments, could be made as we go through this part of the session. And when we get through the end of this part of the session, we'll reflect on what you wrote down to see if you found something that could help you make that routine or procedure better. So, why is it important to actually start strong with routines and procedures on day one? Well, starting strong is going to help you to set the tone for the school year right away. It takes time to get routines, procedures, and expectations to become automatic. So the sooner you set the tone for what you expect from your students, i.e., how you expect them to act and what you expect them to do, then the better that they're going to know and be able to act according to your expectations. And yeah, I know it is November 16th. It's the middle of the year. And I'm saying, yeah, you should start strong on day one. But I would tell you that it's never too late to set this tone. So if you are in a place in which you haven't really set this tone or your routines and expectations are not going well, then day one can be Monday. Day one can be immediately coming back from Thanksgiving break. Day one can be when you return from winter break, if that's what you need to set yourself up for success and set your students up for success. So it's really all about, like, once you plan your routines and procedures, you can make day one whatever you want it to be. It's all about what you do from that day forward. Having a strong system that's well thought out helps students to feel safe and to understand what's expected of them. And the thing that ends up throwing off all your expectations is not being consistent. So you have to build a foundation for consistency. And building this kind of foundation is what's going to help make your classroom management easier throughout the year. So, like I said, being consistent is probably the most important part of teaching in general. Consistency is crucial for effective classroom management because it creates ex- because it creates a stable environment where students know exactly what to expect. It helps students to feel secure and less anxious, and it helps them focus on learning rather than worrying about the unpredictable responses or shifting expectations. By being consistent, you're going to help to build trust and respect, which are essential for maintaining order and encouraging positive behavior in the classroom. Consistent rules and procedures are key to helping students understand what's expected of them. When routines are predictable, students can easily follow along and stay engaged. For instance, if the procedure for starting class is the same every single day, then students are going to know immediately what to do when they enter your room. This clarity reduces confusion and minimizes disruptions, allowing for a smoother flow of instruction and more time spent on meaningful learning activities. Consistent consequences are also essential for fairness and predictability in any classroom. When students know that specific behaviors will always result in the same response, they understand the boundaries and are more likely to follow the rules. This consistency helps prevent perceptions of favoritism and ensures that all students are treated equally. By applying consequences fairly and predictably, you reinforce the rules and maintain an environment where students feel that their behavior is being evaluated impartially. I once worked with a teacher who loved to threaten students. He would put like tally marks up on the board. And every time they weren't being bad, and say, I'm going to hold you a minute after class for every tally that's on the board. And he would get to the end of class and he would have marked 10, 15 minutes to hold students after class. And then what he would end up doing is being like, you know what, you guys got better as class went on. So I'm not going to hold you any after class anymore. Well, the problem with an approach like this is that students were walking all over him. They knew that his consequences weren't real. They knew that he was just threatening them over the course of a class period. And so they just continuously acted bad. And he could never understand why they were not acting the way that he wanted them to act and doing what he wanted them to do. And so there was a day where I pulled him aside and I said, look, you keep telling students that you're going to punish them by holding them after class, and then you don't hold them after class. What would you do if you were a student? And so he started holding to his expectation. If he said he was going to hold students for 5 minutes after class, he held students for 5 minutes after class. And it didn't take very long once he started doing that for students to see that, like, okay, he's being consistent with his policy. We need to stop screwing around, or we're going to continue to not have our free time once class is over, because we're going to be stuck here with him. And so that's just something that I learned very quickly. So I highly recommend building some of your classroom expectations and responses to broken expectations with your students. By involving students in creating classroom rules, it's going to have several benefits. First, it fosters a sense of ownership and responsibility among your students. When they have a say in the rules, they're more likely to follow them because they feel invested and they agree with them. This level of collaboration is going to open up communication between you and your students. Establishing class expectations with your students doesn't mean that you shouldn't have some of your own. You should, but there also need to be some that are done with your students so that they are able to take ownership for their own behavior as well as each other's behavior. It's the best feeling when students actually regulate themselves and each other because they're invested in the classroom being a positive learning environment. Finally, develop responses to broken expectations that are fair and educational rather than punitive. This is crucial for maintaining a positive classroom environment. You want to help students to learn from their mistakes and understand why behaviors are unacceptable. Teach them how to make better choices. This approach encourages a growth mindset and helps students to see mistakes as opportunities for learning rather than as failures. And building off of that last point, I believe that it's critical that the responses that you take with when students do not meet your expectations or the expectations that they set as a class are fair and learning oriented. Barbara Corloso, excuse me, said that discipline is not about getting kids to do what you want them to do. It's about teaching them to do what they need to do. Responses to misbehavior need to focus on teaching rather than on punishing. The goal is supposed to be to help students understand why their behavior was inappropriate and then guide them towards making better choices in the future. When responses are designed to educate, they provide students with opportunities to learn from their mistakes and to develop positive behaviors. This approach fosters a supportive environment where students feel valued and are more likely to engage in self improvement rather than feeling like they're being punished. So, you should have logical consequences that are related to misbehavior so that you can help students understand that there are actually natural outcomes to their choices and actions. For example, if a student disrupts a group activity, a logical consequence might involve them working individually to complete the task. It's about connecting a consequence directly to misbehavior, making it clear why certain behaviors are actually unacceptable. Last, I encourage you to use reflections to help students grasp the impact of their actions. After a behavioral incident, take some time to have the students reflect on their behavior and why it was a wrong or disruptive choice. Ask them, how did it affect other people? This reflection is going to help students to gain insight into their behavior and its consequences, helping them to make better choices in the future. And this can also just be an opportunity for students to pause and get out of their own heads because sometimes when they're misbehaving, they lose sight of like even what they're doing and why they're doing it. I was actually working with a student just yesterday who was kind of just out of his head. He was really upset that thinking that one student was taking another student away from him and that he couldn't be friends with them anymore, and he got into his own head. And there was a point where I stopped and said, so what do you want to accomplish? Like, what's your goal in what you're doing right now? And that actually caused him to stop and think and then respond. And it took him by surprise and it helped to diffuse the situation. It's hard to get students to build habits. So you need to build your routines through repetition. First, routines need to be taught explicitly. Simply expecting students to know and to follow routines without instruction is just unrealistic. Instead, you need to clearly explain each routine. You need to model the behavior and you need to provide students with ample opportunities to practice. Repeated practice ensures that routines become ingrained. You want to start by modeling that routine yourself, demonstrating exactly how you want it done. Then you involve students in practicing the routine multiple times to reinforce the learning. This practice can include role playing, guided practice, and regular check ins to address any issues. You continue reinforcing routines until they become second nature to students. Continually reminding students and providing positive reinforcement is going to help to solidify the routines on a daily basis. And it's going to help to build those habits. Over time, consistent reinforcement helps students to perform routines automatically, reducing the need for constant reminders. And believe me, your students are going to be like, how many times do we have to go through this? And you're going to be like, over and over and over until you get it right and do what it is you're expected to do. Teaching routines can be both fun and effective. You want to use engaging and creative methods like games and interactive activities. For example, you can turn routine practices into a classroom game where students earn points for correctly following procedures. Interactive activities like creating routine themed scavenger hunts or using educational apps that are designed to reinforce routines also make learning these procedures more engaging. I enjoy having students to take a ridiculous following directions test. You know, the kind that says, read everything before doing anything, which they never do. And then students do a bunch of ridiculous things throughout. And you only get like one or two students who just sit there the whole time, kind of like laughing at everybody else. So there's a lot of really fun ways that you can go about teaching these routines. Another is through role playing. Role playing is a powerful tool for practicing routines in a fun and memorable way. By acting out different scenarios, students can rehearse how to follow routines in a hands-on manner. So students could role play how to transition between activities or how to properly ask for help. This approach, excuse me, this approach not only makes the learning process interactive, but it also helps students to visualize and practice routines in a realistic context, which is going to help to reinforce their understanding and their application. Visual aids and reminders also play a crucial role in reinforcing routines. You want to display charts, posters, and visual schedules in your classroom so that you can provide constant, clear reminders of the expected behaviors and procedures. Visual cues are going to help students to remember and follow the routines consistently. And they're also a quick reference for you to be able to remind them and for them to be able to remind themselves, which is going to make it easier for them to stay on track. So now that we've talked about all the technical aspects of starting the school year strong, let's get into the relationship building piece. Strong student-teacher relationships are absolutely fundamental to effective classroom management. When students feel connected to their teacher, they are more likely to engage in the class and to follow the rules. These relationships build trust and respect, creating a positive atmosphere where students are motivated to succeed and are more willing to cooperate. By fostering strong relationships, you lay the groundwork for a classroom environment that supports both academic and behavioral success. Building strong relationships with students involves several key strategies. You need to start by getting to know each student individually. Learn about their interests, their strengths, their challenges. Show empathy by being understanding and supportive of their needs and their concerns. Apply rules and procedures fairly, predictably, and consistently. When students see that you are reliable and genuinely care about their well-being, they are more likely to reciprocate with positive behavior and engagement. Positive relationships between students and teachers can significantly reduce behavior issues and foster a supportive learning environment. When students trust and respect their teacher, they are more inclined to adhere to classroom expectations and engage positively. So, when do you do all of this with students? I do it in what's called a Unit 0. Unit 0 is the unit that you do before any academic work. Now, I do this at the very beginning of the year, but I also do a Unit 0 at the start of the second semester after winter break so that I can reinforce. But the idea here is that you have this unit that's dedicated specifically to establishing your routines and your expectations. The primary goals of a Unit 0, like I said, are just to create that positive classroom culture and set clear expectations for your students. It's taking the time to build rapport with your students, to establish a supportive and inclusive environment, and to clearly communicate the behavioral and academic expectations that you have. You do this so that you can help your students to feel comfortable and confident which is going to facilitate a more effective learning experience throughout the year. Your Unit 0 involves a variety of activities and focus areas to set the tone for your year. Icebreakers will help students to get to know each other and to build a sense of community. Classroom discussions allow you to introduce and explore expectations, rules, and procedures in a collaborative manner. Practice of routines, such as how to enter the classroom, transition between activities, and manage materials, all ensure that students are familiar and comfortable with performing the tasks that you need them to perform. These activities collectively contribute to a well-organized and engaging start to the school year. So I use the Unit 0 to not only establish my routines and procedures, but it's also where we do community building like survivor games and scavenger hunts. It's where we simply talk and get to know each other. I do Q&As with them. It's where I design our agreed upon expectations. And quite frankly, it's just where students get used to being back in school after their long summer break or even after their winter break, because even in that 2 weeks or 3 weeks for some schools, they tend to forget, everything that you taught them in the first semester. So I always like to make sure I am taking the time to do that outside of academic work. There's always time for the academic work, but you're never going to have success with the academic work if you don't set students up for success with routines, procedures, and expectations on the front end. So aside from having clear and consistent routines, procedures, and expectations, it's also important that you have a well-organized classroom. You want to make sure that you have clear systems for materials and note-taking. You want well-defined systems that are going to help students to know exactly where to find and return materials, which is going to reduce time that's spent searching and minimizing disruptions. Similarly, structured note-taking systems are going to help to ensure that students capture and organize information effectively, which is going to help to support better comprehension and retention. Managing technology use in the classroom requires establishing clear guidelines and monitoring strategies. Begin by setting specific rules for when and how technology can be used, which is going to include phones, and these things are going to help to ensure that you have supports rather that your technology supports rather than distracts from the learning objectives. Implementing procedures for technology use, such as designated times for device use and clear instructions for online activities, are going to help your students to keep focused. Regularly review and adjust these strategies based on your student feedback and technological advancements so that you can maintain an effective learning environment. I was in a school where technology was a major distraction. So I actually shifted from digital work to physical work. And I had an expectation that students could only use their computers at certain points in time. And I limited how long they could be on their computers to do those tasks because I was experiencing where students were not doing what they were supposed to do. And instead, they were spending time watching YouTube videos and getting on Netflix and things like that. So this is different in every area, every school, every district. Everybody has their own different set of technology and technology policies, but you want to make sure that you have very clear policies in your classroom so that you can use that technology to the best of its ability and the best of your ability without it actually being a distraction. You also want to make sure that you have efficient class entry and exit procedures. This is important for maximizing instructional time. For my entry, I stand in the doorway and I greet my students. They walk in, they get straight to work on their do now assignment, and this helps to minimize downtime and it creates a smoother transition into my lesson. It also gives me time to take attendance. And then for exits, I use a clear, organized process for students to pack up, return materials, and prepare for their dismissal. Techniques like a cleanup signal or a timed exit routine can streamline this process and help ensure that you have valuable instructional time and that you minimize disruptions. You also need to know all your participation and engagement strategies. Understanding different types of participation can enhance classroom interaction and learning. Raised hands are ideal for allowing individual students to respond or ask questions, ensuring orderly and thoughtful contributions. Choral response, where the whole class responds together, works well for reinforcing key concepts or checking for understanding quickly. Other methods, such as think, pair, share, or small group discussions, are going to engage deeper engagement they're going to encourage deeper engagement and allow students to explore ideas collaboratively. It's about choosing the right type of participation, and that's going to depend on the goals that you have and the need for individual versus collective responses, as well as the desired level of student interaction. What's really important is that you explicitly tell students what your expectations are. You have to explicitly tell them that you're taking silent hands or that you're asking for choral response. If you don't tell them explicitly what you're looking for, you're going to get the opposite, quite frankly, of what you're looking for. If you don't tell them you want silent hands, then they're going to just shout out answers. So it's really important that you are explicit with what you actually want from them. Tracking student engagement is also going to help to monitor and support active participation. Participation charts can be used to record individual student contributions and identify patterns in engagement. For example, a simple chart can track which students are participating regularly or need more encouragement. It can be as simple as printing off a class roster and keeping tallies for each student's participation each day. If you want to get fancy, there's even apps designed for tracking engagement and providing real-time feedback. They often include features like participation analytics, student polls, and instant feedback mechanisms. I like doing monthly raffles. So I give students raffle tickets each time they participate. And then each month I raffle off different prizes. And I give those tickets out for other things, not just participation, but that's one of my positive reinforcement techniques. Setting and reinforcing voice level expectations is also an important technique for creating a productive learning environment. You need to clearly define what appropriate voice levels are for various activities, such as a soft voice for independent work and a moderate voice for group discussions. Reinforce these expectations consistently to help your students to understand and adhere to them. This practice minimizes distractions. It ensures that all students can hear and focus on the lesson, and it creates a more organized classroom atmosphere. Regular reminders and visual cues, such as posters or signals, can also help to remind your students of the expected voice levels for different activities. I like to use the voice level numbers where 0 is silent, 1 is quiet, and 2 is group discussion. And then I actually display those numbers on the board. And that way, if students get out of that voice level, I can actually just address them and point to the board and be like, hey, we're supposed to be at this voice level. Finally, you want to set up a supportive and positive learning environment. Defining core classroom values involves collaboratively establishing principles that are going to guide behavior and interactions. Start by identifying key values that align with your teaching philosophy and the needs of your students. Involve your students in this process by holding a discussion or a brainstorming session where they can contribute ideas and express what values they think are important. This isn't only going to help in creating a set of values that resonates with everyone, but it's also going to foster a sense of ownership and commitment among your students. Visual aids help to reinforce classroom expectations by providing constant reminders of the rules and the routines. Displaying posters, charts, and infographics around the classroom helps students to remember what's expected of them and supports consistent behavior. Consistency in using these visual aids is essential. They should be prominently displayed and referenced regularly to ensure that students remain aware of the expectations. Finally, modeling the expected behaviors is a fundamental aspect of effective classroom management. As a teacher, demonstrating the behaviors that you want to see in your students, such as respect, responsibility, and active participation, is going to set a standard for them to follow. By consistently modeling these behaviors, you provide clear examples of how students should act, which is going to help them to internalize and replicate these actions. Additionally, when students observe you adhering to the same standards, it reinforces the importance of these behaviors and it fosters a positive and respectful classroom culture. So, take a moment and go back to the routine and procedure that you said has been difficult for you to establish at the beginning of this first part of the presentation. How can you establish or strengthen it based on what you learned in this portion of the workshop? Don't forget to sign up for a short feedback call with me as well, because by booking and attending that call, you're going to get my routines, procedures, and expectations checklist, which is going to make your planning a whole lot easier. One part down, three to go. Part two. So, for the next part of this workshop, I want you to now think about the standards that you require, the standards you are required to teach and how you currently align them with your lessons with your lessons. So what I want you to do in your notes is write down the biggest challenge that you face with this process of using standards and aligning them to your lessons. And then we're going to dive into how to dissect and align standards to your lessons so that you can ensure that your teaching meets required benchmarks. So in this section of the presentation, I'm going to talk about understanding the standards and breaking them down into manageable components, about how to align lessons and activities to those standards, how to use those standards to guide differentiation to ensure that all students meet learning goals. And this is the backwards planning technique, which is based on understanding by design. So let's start by talking about why. Why backwards plan? Well, backward planning is important because it helps teachers to create lessons that are aligned with academic standards and to ensure that students achieve their learning and objective. Often, teachers grab content and curriculum that is already standard aligned, but without knowing how it's standard aligned. Additionally, content is often linked to like 3, 4, 5, sometimes 6 standards all at once. While standards generally do cross over, the more skills that you try to teach in a single lesson before you build some kind of a foundation for each of those skills, the more difficult it's going to be for all students or even just the majority of students to actually be able to master those skills. So it's really, really important that you know your standards and that you know the skills that each standard has in it so that you can build that foundation. That's why so often we see students not understanding what they're doing or not being able to work quick enough, or they're able to do this one thing but not this other thing. It's all because they lack the actual foundation for a given skill. So you want to use backwards planning to help you design effective lessons. To do that, you start by identifying the end goal, which is the academic standard. Then you determine what students need to know and be able to do in order to meet that standard. Then you develop assessments and learning activities that are going to align with the standard. And you do each of these things before ever designing a lesson to accompany a standard. Ideally, you actually want to break down all the standards that you want to cover in a unit along with the ways that you can assess each, which is what I'm talking about in this workshop. And then you can design your unit assessment before ever planning a single lesson. The whole idea here is knowing where you want to take your students before you design the lessons to get them there. It's like planning a vacation. You don't just get in the car and start driving. You know your end destination first, you map it out, and then you start driving. So let's get into the first part of what backwards planning looks like, dissecting standards. So academic standards are clear and measurable guidelines that are going to define what students should know and be able to do at each grade level or within a specific subject area. They serve as benchmarks for educational expectations, and they help to ensure a consistent level of learning across schools and districts. Breaking down academic standards should be the first step in any backwards plan. You do this in order to identify the skills and the knowledge that students should master for any given standard. And by having a deep knowledge of the standards you teach, you actually have a better opportunity for students to develop mastery. So everything starts with choosing your standard, and then identifying the verbs and the nouns that are in that standard. The verbs are the skills. These are the things that students need to be able to do. The nouns are the concepts. These are the things that students need to know. You identify these in the standard so that you can start to know exactly what to teach in order for students to master the standard skills. So I'm using an SAT reading standard for this example, so I can show you exactly what I'm talking about. But these same steps that I'm going through apply no matter what kind of standards you're using. So whether you're using Common Core standards or next generation science standards or any other kind of academic standard type, the same idea is going to apply. So we start by identifying our verb. Our skill for this particular standard is that students are able to cite. Then we look for our nouns, which is going to be our content knowledge. So for this standard, that's going to be textual evidence and claims and points. So when we think about what students need to be able to do when it comes to this standard, they need to be able to cite, specifically select in this case, since it's on the SAT. But if I was doing this in application, they would need to be able to cite. And they also need to, and to do that, they're also going to need to be able to evaluate the text that is provided so that students can choose the best type of support. And then when we think about what they need to know, they need to understand what a given or what a claim or a given point is, and they need to know what good evidence is. So I have to build the foundation. If I am teaching this standard, I can't just give students work that goes with the standard completely until they know how to do these things and know this information. Next, you use the breakdown to identify the key understandings that students need to gain from the standard. The baseline understandings are the things that you can pull directly as well as inferentially through the standard breakdown. What students need to know in order to learn the concepts or execute the skills. So let's put this all together with my example of this IITE standard. So here you can see how the skills and the concepts are reflected in the key understandings, but let's break it all down. So first we are looking at, we pulled out these, separated the skills and the concepts from the standard. And when we look at the concepts where we're asking, what's this standard asking students to know? Students need to know what a claim or a given point is in order for them to be able to identify the claim in a passage. Students need to know what evidence is in order for them to be able to identify key ideas in evidence. And if students are going to be able to cite, it means they need to be able to select the best evidence that supports the claim. If they're going to evaluate the text the text that's provided, they're going to need to be able to choose best support. To do that, then they need to know how to evaluate the evidence options and connect back to the claim. And then here there's one implied baseline skill, which is being able to determine the connection between evidence and claims. Oh, I apologize. So these are what you see at the bottom here. These are all the baseline skills. These are the most basic skills that are attached to the standard. These are often reflected in multiple choice questions. But once you establish these skills, you can move your students to more application through writing, projects, and speaking assignments. And what I recommend you do is use a template like this, where you can keep your dissected standards. You want to collaborate with your colleagues to create one document that can be built over time and used by multiple people in the planning process. Once you have a resource like this, you're going to have it forever. And it's going to make your planning for you and for others much easier for the foreseeable future. And as a final note, some might say that you could do this or even less with AI, and this is true. However, this is the kind of task that I strongly encourage you to do on your own. Having a deep understanding and knowledge of the standards that you teach is part of what's going to make you a highly effective teacher. It takes doing this level of cognitive work to truly have that deep understanding and knowledge. So don't get me wrong, AI is great for a lot of things. This is not one of the things that I recommend using AI for. So, think back to the biggest challenge that you said you face with aligning standards to lessons. What can you take away from this dissection process that's going to help you to overcome that challenge? And then again, as a reminder, for anyone who wasn't with us earlier in the presentation, you're going to be able to get my standard dissection template, the one that I just had up on the screen. You're going to get that for free by booking and attending a short feedback call within 2 weeks following this presentation. This template can be copied then for every single standard that you teach, which is going to help you to have one document that can guide you in how to teach each of your standards, which is going to help to make that future planning much, much easier. So let's build on this, because once you've dissected your standards, now you are able to create assessments from those dissected standards so that you can accurately measure student understanding. So in this section, some of the key points that we're going to talk about here are designing assessments that align with the standards. We're going to look at some sample questions to discuss how to plan that instruction and understand how to use question stems. Discuss ways to increase levels of cognition, as well as how to plan those assessments. So the next thing I want you to think about is, what is your biggest challenge, or what's the biggest challenge that you face with creating assessments from standards? And put that challenge in your notes. So now that you've dissected your standards, or a standard, you want to examine a variety of questions that are aligned to the skill. You can gather these from national, state, or district exams, from published units and lesson plans, and even in this case, through AI. You want to look for commonalities and differences. Look for skills within skills. So many standards contain multiple skills. One of the things that teachers tend to do is teach too many skills at once. Until a student is able to master one skill, they're not going to be able to be successful when skills are synthesized. You also want to categorize questions as you look them up, which you can do just by saying, like, this is an easy question, a medium question, a hard question, or you might identify that questions are part of paired text questions or they're single text questions. Maybe it's a question that is seen at the start of a passage, the middle of a passage, or the end of a passage, etc. There's a lot of different ways that you can categorize your questions so that you can help to isolate those different skills. And doing this work should help you to start to see those baseline skills at play to help you know how to then teach them. And it can even help you to determine prior knowledge and potential misconceptions and gaps that are going to need to be addressed if students are going to be successful with the skills. So going back to my example with this IITE standard, what I did was I pulled questions from the SAT. So the first two questions that I pulled are actually paired questions, meaning that they are dependent on one another in order to get them correct. Then I have a single question. So this is one that doesn't depend on anything else. And the last is a synthesis question, which is where students have to draw a connection between two different texts. So, doing all of this is really about understanding the way that questions are written for students to be able to demonstrate the single standard. You can also see that each of these asks students to be able to find each of the best support. So, that goes back to that base standard that I showed in the first place. Now that you've looked at sample questions and you've compared what you noticed to the skills, the concepts, and the key understandings, you can plan how to teach and assess the standard. The big question is to ask, how can you authentically teach this skill? What are the methods that you can use to teach it? From there, you're able to connect to the unit content and to start planning how to connect the skills and the skill measurements to it. This is a good place to think about ways that the skills can be taught through application and less through multiple choice. So as you can see in the example of the IITE standard, I can use any kind of text in order to teach it, and it can be applied through any kind of writing. The baseline skills of the standard are about choices of evidence in order to support a claim. Choosing and writing about the connections between a claim and evidence is higher order thinking because it means that students are going to be able to execute two different skills at once. First, they have to be able to identify a claim, and then they have to identify evidence to support it. Ultimately, if they can write claims, cite evidence to support claims, thereby making connections between claims and evidence, and use evidence to analyze claims, then they're going to be able to simply identify when it's excuse me, that they're going to be able to then it's going to help them to be able to simply identify, right? Like that's a much simpler skill when they have to do that on standardized exams. And so the whole point here is that the more you're able to teach these baseline skills and then teach them through true application, when students then see these same types of things on multiple choice tests, it makes it much easier. The final step then is to curate a list of question stems. This is going to give you stems for your assessments and your lessons, and for each time that you cover the standard in the future. These stems can be used whether you're creating multiple choice questions, short response questions, or more applicable assessments like essays or presentations, etc. And by having a document where all your standards are broken down, this list can continue to grow as you and your colleagues learn and grow. So in this example, you can see I pulled some of my question stems directly from the SAT, but then I also created some questions that are more authentic and open-ended rather than multiple choice based. And finally, I have some questions that I could use as a way for students to truly apply in a more highly cognitive way. Now that you have a fully developed idea of what goes into teaching a standard at its core, you can start to think about ways to continuously push students and the skills of the standards to higher levels of cognition and rigor. You do this by using resources like Bloom's taxonomy and the depth of knowledge in order to identify additional verbs and skills to teach and to push students to becoming more independent thinkers and learners. So this is how you can grow your list of question stems and ways to apply key understandings of standard skills. And a note, when you're doing this, it is important that students are actually executing the skill and that you're not just using resources like this to have verbs in your standard objectives and goals. Like you don't want to pull from here and say that students are evaluating something if what they're really doing is identifying something. You don't want to use these just so that your objective sounds high level and fancy. You want to make sure that you're using this so that students are actually doing the thing that you want them to do. These are going to help you to find the right ways to step away from stages of dependent learning, like remembering and recalling, and moving up to more independent skills, like thinking strategically, analytically, and evaluatively. That's just something we are severely lacking in education. Too many of our students and sometimes adults are too dependent on low level thinking, where it's only about memorizing something and recalling information that you were once taught, right? Too often, we are not thinking in a strategic way. We are not evaluating what's right and wrong, what's relevant and irrelevant, what's reliable and not reliable, what is biased. And so we have to really be working on building our students up to these higher level of cognitive order thinking. So now you can then start to design your assessment. You've done all this work and we haven't even designed an assessment yet, right? So when you start to design your assessment, you start by, of course, choosing a skill from the standard that you want to assess. Oftentimes, like I've said, standards have a lot of connected skills in a single. So in a single lesson, you're generally not going to teach a full standard until you've already taught the basics that go along with it. This can change from standard to standard, from subject to subject, grade to grade, school to school. So you have to be aware. This is why dissecting the standard first is so important. If ever you are teaching and a student is lost, it's likely because they're missing some kind of baseline skill in order to execute the higher order thinking skill or the combined skills. Then you use the stems that you created to put together your assessment. And you want to mix up how often you have multiple choice versus authentic and application-based assessments. There is a need for both. So you have to find the right balance based on your students' needs. But if all you're doing is multiple choice questions and you're never doing other application-based things, then you are never really going to get your students to think at that higher level. And if you're doing all application things and never doing multiple choice things, then you're never preparing students for the way that they will see questions and how they'll understand skills and standards when they're taking standardized tests. So it's important that you don't go too heavy one way or the other. Finding the balance of doing a bit of both is really, really important. When you're thinking about creating an assessment for a single lesson, you should be getting your students to address at least one and sometimes all of the following three questions. So, at the minimum, you want students to be able to answer one of these questions if you're talking about an assessment for a single lesson over a single standard or part of a standard. So, first, can my students successfully execute the skill? Can they perform it? Can they do it? 2, can my students correctly apply the concept that I taught them? Or 3, can my students summarize what they learned today? So, no matter what you do, at the end of any lesson, you want to make sure that one of these 3 questions can be answered. Sometimes it'll be 2 of these questions, sometimes it'll be 3 of these questions. So you have now dissected standards, broken them down, you've created question stems, you've thought about how to teach them authentically, you've created an assessment, and now you're ready to plan and write your learning objective. That would be the next step in the backwards plan, would be writing that strong learning objective that is connected to the standard and connected to the assessment. A lot of times people write the objectives first, and then what happens is objectives and lessons and assessments and standards are not aligned. So it's really important that you start by breaking down the standards and doing all that work, then creating the assessment, and then writing the objectives so that all three things align and match. And after that, you'll be ready to plan the rest of your lesson. So that would be the final step in designing how you're going to get students to the assessment through the lesson, is planning the lesson itself. So this backwards plan is really, really important if you want to truly get your students to a place where you want to get them and make sure that everything is aligned every step of the way. So before we dive into our last learning topic of the workshop, and we are way ahead of schedule, which is great for all of you, so you can get about on your Saturday, I want to share a little bit about the teacher tutor and how it can support you. So with 18 years in education, and I think you can see in this presentation that I understand the challenges that teachers face and how crucial it is to have the right kind of support. Did you know that in a survey done in 2008, 62% of teachers said that they were very satisfied with their jobs? When that same survey went out in 2024, that number dropped from 62% of people being very satisfied to 18%. 48% of teachers now say that their mental health has a negative impact on their work, and this stems from multiple factors, but it all comes down to a lack of support in one way or another. So the teacher tutor offers personalized one-on-one coaching and resources that are tailored to empower and rejuvenate teachers who are facing burnout, stress, and a lack of support. Our approach is rooted in empathy and a commitment to helping educators not only survive, but thrive in their careers. So why is this the right professional development for you? Well, this workshop is just a taste of what we offer. So let's talk about how you're supported in the teacher tutor coaching program. You get 6 months of bi-weekly one-on-one coaching calls. We work in a single area to help you grow in the most impactful way, and then we move on bit by bit. You have custom strategy sessions. In each session, we collaborate to find solutions to problems, and you are always going to leave with an actionable step so that you can go and implement it directly into your classroom. We review how that went, we make adjustments, and we move on to the next action item when you're ready. Nothing about this coaching program is one size fits all, but development that truly meets you where you are, just like you do for students. I offer weekly office hours where anybody in the coaching program can pop in just to ask questions, get help, or just listen in while others get help. And this is one of the times where we come together as a teacher tutor network. We have a Telegram group and email for quick responses. These are spaces to collaborate, to get feedback, and to get quick answers to questions. And it's just another space where everyone within our network can support one another. There's weekly accountability so that on your off week of coaching, I will still check in with you via email just to see how you're doing in implementing your plan and to see if there's anything you need. This is not like any other type of professional development where you learn something and then you're completely on your own to implement it and figure it out. In the teacher tutor, we're a team. There's also networking opportunities. So there will be virtual meetup events to collaborate and to network with one another. So getting personalized coaching with the teacher tutor is really a unique experience, especially if you work at a school where you don't get one-on-one coaching, where all your check-ins are managed meetings, where your professional developments are really just meetings, like, hey, call it what it is. And where evaluations are happening over observations with valuable feedback, because that's an experience that I've had in a lot of the places where I've taught is where, yeah, I meet with an assistant principal or something like every other week, but it's not actually about developing me. It's more about, school data and what's your GPA. And it feels a lot more like I'm being managed than being coached to get better and better. And so that's what we don't do here, right? Here, there's no judgment. This is all about helping you with what you need and where you are so that you can be better, so that your students can be better. So, what does it look like in this program? Well, you start with a one-on-one 90-minute onboarding where you're going to get to really dig in and where we're going to get to know each other and dissect your needs and talk about what coaching bucket you would like to begin with, because I offer coaching in different types of buckets, because again, it's about meeting you with where you are and knowing that every single teacher out there has different needs. And then from there, we schedule your sessions. You get one-on-one bi-weekly 60-minute coaching sessions for 6 months. You get dedicated meeting times, but also with the flexibility to reschedule up to 4 times because, life happens. And this means that we're going to meet when things are most convenient for you. So that might be on a planning period. It might be on an evening or a weekend. It's all about what fits into your busy schedule. You get to move at your own pace. Each session, we're going to focus on reflecting on the previous action and we're going to decide together on the best next course of action. And you're always going to have actionable steps and ways to implement those steps quickly and with ease. And coming soon, we'll be offering group workshops with guest trainers and speakers specifically for our network. And so we hope to really craft those sessions around the skills that our clients want to learn more about in their coaching. So I know you're thinking this is all like too good to be true. So what does it cost? Well, keep in mind, we're talking about true personalized professional development. We're talking about you becoming the best teacher that you can be. We're talking about getting over 6 months of one-on-one attention from somebody who is doing the research to help you get better and then teaching it to you so that you can thrive. So, if you pay in full, the price is $4,000. But we also offer financing with a down payment of $1,050, which means you then have 5 monthly payments of $630. And if you love your coaching, like I expect you will, you're able to renew for just $500 a month for your next 6 months with it, which is $1,000 value simply for committing to growing together. So if you have any questions or you want to talk more about cost, we can do that in the feedback call that you book and attend after the workshop. Okay, on to the fourth topic and the thing that I know that everybody is really here to talk about, which is how to establish better balance in your professional life so that you can maintain your well-being while excelling at your job. So here we are going to talk about setting clear boundaries to manage your time effectively, prioritizing tasks to avoid burnout and maintain your job satisfaction, and implementing strategies for work-life balance that suit your personal needs. So work-life balance isn't just a buzzword. It's essential for preventing burnout and ensuring long-term success in the classroom. By managing your time and your energy wisely, you can boost your productivity and your creativity, leading to better outcomes for you and your students. Anne Lamott said, almost everything will work again if you unplug it for a few minutes, including you. This is so true and something that I am trying to help instill in my current leader. Look, it took me 15 years too late into my career to learn this lesson, and my life has been so much better since I have. When I was younger, I was a go-getter who was happy and willing to take on far more than I could chew. And I wanted everything to be perfect when I taught. And this was causing me to spend more time at school than almost anybody else. I was pretty much always within the first 3 people to arrive to school and one of the last 3 people to leave every single day. I was also giving up nights and weekends in order to be the best. I was legit working every weeknight until from, somewhere I would work until 9 o'clock at night, 10 o'clock at night, even up to 11 o'clock at night. And often I was spending most of my Saturdays and Sundays also working, especially when I was coaching sports and running clubs. Eventually, I started burning out and I knew that things had to change or I was never going to be able to continue with this career that I love so much. So that's why I am now going to share my 12 tips to creating that balance and building those boundaries so that you can live a happier life while still being a teacher. The first step in setting boundaries is establishing clear work hours. You need to decide on specific days that you will stay after to get work done. And if you're willing and able and that determined to work outside of your contract hours, set specific days and times that you're willing to work. and never work outside the hours you decide. No school deadline or expectation is worth your mental health. Once you've defined these, you need to communicate them clearly to your colleagues, to students, and to parents. Let them know when you're going to be available, and more importantly, when you are not available. You should not be answering reminds, texts, or emails all night long or first thing in the morning. Set boundaries with your devices as well. Notifications should only be on for urgent matters during non-work hours. One of the greatest things I ever did was take my school email off my phone. Because if there was ever a notification, I just never had cause to look and respond. So like I was all about like if I get a notification, I'm like, oh, I've got to check it right now. And that was leading me to responding to work emails when I shouldn't be responding to work emails. So I was breaking my own boundaries, and I was establishing that like, hey, I'm just available anytime you want me. But you shouldn't do that. You shouldn't be available just anytime people at work want you. You're replaceable. So you have to set these clear work hours for yourself, and then you have to stick to them and be disciplined about it. Step 2 is to designate planning time for yourself. By designating and protecting your planning time, it's just really critical. I know that there's days that you're going to need to just sit there and do nothing. And I know this time is precious and short, so you should use it wisely. Avoid using this time for non-teaching responsibilities, and don't be afraid to ask your admin when you're going to get time back if it's taking up meetings or if you're taking up your own time. Your planning time is sacred time. So use your planning time for you and for what you need to accomplish, not for other school tasks. And I cannot stress enough how important it is for you to tell your admin no, because you need the time to do what you need to do. And if they're going to force you to do something when it's your planned time, to ask them when they're giving you that time back. Prioritizing tasks helps to prevent work from spilling over into your personal time. You want to identify the most important tasks and focus on those first. If something can't get done during this week, make sure it becomes a priority for the next week. Blurring the lines between work and personal life can lead to burnout. So whenever possible, complete your work at school and avoid taking grading and planning home. You want to make sure that you set a clear boundary. Your home should be a place of rest and relaxation, not an extension of your classroom. Now, there is a however here. Because the planning time that we're given is often not enough time to get our things done, the goal should be to limit the amount of work that you take home. As I said earlier, if you have to, if you're willing to, or if you simply want to work outside of your contract hours, it is important to define specific work hours. I am very big on spending time in my summer, on breaks, and early in the year, designating planning time so that I can get as far ahead in my planning as I possibly can. I often plan a day or two each week where I'm willing to stay after school for an hour or two and get as much done so that so that when I leave, I'm done completely for the day. And then I'll dedicate one weekend day and set very specific hours on that day, like an 8 to 2. And I never work beyond that time that I set. I do the same when I'm on breaks. I set very specific days and times to work, and I commit to enjoying the rest of my break work free. When I'm working at home or I'm working after school, I get done what I get done and it's over. If I don't finish everything, then I don't finish everything. The work is always going to be there tomorrow. It never goes away. So limit that work and limit what you do and stick to it. Be consistent, be disciplined. Step 5 is to delegate and collaborate. Don't be afraid to share responsibilities with colleagues, and you should do that as much as you possibly can. This is going to help to lighten your workload and create a more balanced work environment. Remember, teamwork isn't just for students. You can't survive long term as a teacher if you try to do everything by yourself. Tip number 6, create a physical workspace. So when you do work from home, it's vital to create a physical workspace that is not your couch or your kitchen. The idea is that you want to be able to mentally disconnect from work when you step away from that space. The more that you work in front of the TV, for example, the more you're going to begin to associate work with a space which is meant to be personal space. It's important to maintain that separation between work and personal life, even in a virtual or a hybrid setting. I work from 2 places in my home. I have an extra bedroom that I've designated as an office, and sometimes I will sit on my back patio and work, but mostly that's just so I can enjoy weather while I work, especially when it's nice outside, right? So I don't work outside frequently enough that it blurs that line. But I used to work from the couch. I used to sit on the couch and throw, a football game or a baseball game on or something, and I would sit there and I would work away. But what started to happen was I started to associate work with my personal space, and I stopped and I started to get to a space in which I wasn't enjoying like watching television anymore because I was constantly thinking about being on my computer and what I needed to do for work. So it's really important to really separate where you work from where you relax. Tip number 7 is to practice self-care. Self-care is not a luxury. Indeed, self-care is a critical necessity for those who serve others. Parker J. Palmer. Self-care is vital to your overall mental well-being. Personally, I hit a point where I was not taking care of myself, and it started to manifest in the workplace. So this is going to look differently for different people. But whether it's exercise, a hobby, or spending quality time with loved ones, these activities are going to help to recharge you and remind you that life exists beyond work. Make self-care a priority in your routine. Tip number 8 is learn to say no. Teachers tend to be overachievers more times than not. So remember, it's okay to say no. If taking on additional tasks is going to overwhelm your schedule, politely decline or negotiate alternatives. Only you know your time, and you have to be your own advocate when it comes to your time, because our time is precious. You want to avoid overcommitting because it's going to lead to stress and anxiety. And don't allow your admin to push last minute tasks on you. If you don't have the time to get something done in the time frame that they request, politely tell them that. Give them a more appropriate time frame and ask them if that's going to work for them. If it doesn't, Ask them how they can help you and what they can remove from your plate in order for you to accomplish something for them. It is okay to protect your own time. Tip number 9, schedule breaks. When you put together your weekly plan, make sure you schedule breaks for yourself. Even if it's a 5-minute meditation or a specific time to chat with friends, family, and colleagues, try and incorporate regular breaks throughout your day. Continuous work without rest is going to lead to a decline in your mental health and into overall burnout. And yes, this includes taking your lunch. Don't work through it. I did this for many, many, many years, and it really hurt my daily mental health. It took me far too long to realize it. So, this is a big push that I like to make. And your lunch doesn't mean that you have to eat in the teacher's lounge or even with others. I often ate by myself in my room just to give me the time to breathe and prepare for the second half of my day. Often I avoid the teacher's lounge because in my experience, it's always been a negative space more than a positive space, and that's something else that's going to ruin your mental health. Step number 10, communicate with your family. It's important to communicate your work schedule and your boundaries with your family. Their understanding and support can help you to maintain the balance that you need between work and personal life. Fostering that balance may include many things, but it's not limited to sharing a calendar so that they know when you work late, when you're working late after school, or in sharing household responsibilities like who's cooking which night. Have them help you quit working when your dedicated time is up. There's a lot of ways that you can utilize the people around you to help you maintain your boundaries and your personal space when it comes to work. The better communication that you have with your family, the more supportive they can be in creating that better balance between work and home. So use the people around you. Tip 11 is to reflect and adjust because work-life balance isn't something that you set once and then forget. You have to regularly assess how things are going. If you notice that your boundaries are starting to slip, you should take steps to adjust as you need, just like you would do in the classroom. And then you should recommit to what you need. It happens. We commit to working out and we get off by a day or a week. That's where I'm at right now. And it's important to recognize what helps us to stay sane and to keep it as a routine part of our life. And then when our discipline slips, we need to get back to it. The personal discipline is a really important part of maintaining our own mental health. And finally, tip number 12 is to lead by example with your colleagues. Demonstrate your commitment to work-life balance so that you can be a model to others. This is a really hard thing to accomplish when you don't set your mind to it. And the more you're surrounded by others who also don't have it, the harder it is to commit. You want to encourage your colleagues and students to do the same. Tell your colleagues when they see that you're not doing well and let them know that you care by pushing them to close up work and do something for themselves instead. Consider the homework that you're giving and think about what your students get from all their classes and what they need when they get home. We get so wrapped up in not taking care of our own well-being, we sometimes forget that the more we put on our students outside of the classroom, the more we're impacting their well-being in the same way that ours is being impacted. By leading by example, you not only benefit yourself, but also you inspire those around you to prioritize their own work-life balance. Your actions can set a positive tone for your school environment. So now it's your turn to take action. When you leave here today, I challenge you to create your own work-life balance plan using the tips that we just discussed. Identify one boundary that you need to set and put it in motion. Choose one self-care activity to prioritize and plan it out on a calendar and do it regularly. Outline a strategy to protect your planning time and do it consistently. Once you've completed your plan, share it with a partner. Excuse me. It could be a life partner, it could be a colleague at work, it could be a best friend, a relative. It doesn't matter who you share your plan with. Simply having someone who's going to ask you about it is going to create accountability, and that is going to help you stick to the plan. So I want to just say thank you. Thank you so much for joining me for today's workshop. To close, I'd like to share a final story and express how excited I am to continue supporting your journey. Excuse me, I've been talking for too long. See, y'all know this from being in the classroom. So let me just share this final story with you. When I was early in my career, I was mostly left to design my own units, lessons, and assessments. I didn't have a set of textbooks, and I really didn't have anything to go off of. I was given a set of standards, and I was told that that's what I was to teach, and I was to grade based on those standards. I had to figure things out for myself, and luckily with colleagues. But even that collaboration wasn't helping me to be as good as I could be. I wanted to find new and better ways to help my students to be their best selves. Whole group professional developments rarely helped me because it was tough to implement something on my own and not have anybody hold me accountable or talk things through or give me feedback and a lot more. There's a lot of ways that whole group professional development has not been beneficial for me. It wasn't until I received one-on-one coaching that I was able to start actually making positive changes. That's when I started to find a better groove and to thrive as an instructor. Once I moved into leadership, I started to be that person for other teachers. Supporting other teachers really is what brings me the most joy. That's why I founded the Teacher Tutor. It's why I started the podcast Teachers Talkin' and launched the Successful Educator Transformation. I'm excited to continue to broaden this community and to support all of the teachers that I can. I hope that each of you is going to book a feedback call with me, as I really appreciate feedback. I would really appreciate feedback on this workshop. And remember, by booking and attending that call, you're going to get all of the resources for free that I shared throughout this presentation. That includes my routines, procedures, and expectations checklist, my standard dissection and assessment planning template, as well as the 12 tips for setting teacher boundaries. You can also follow my social media wherever you are and listen to my podcast, Teachers Talkin', anywhere you get your podcasts. And if you'd like to be a guest on the podcast, let me know in our feedback call, and I'll get you signed up to record with us, because we love to talk with other teachers. And you don't need to be an expert on anything, just passionate about something in education that you want to share with others. So again, thank you so much for joining me. I hope that you found the workshop to be a valuable use of this time, and I hope you have a great rest of your weekend. Take care, everybody.